You've often heard the expression, nobody's perfect, which is obviously true. But it's also true that nothing is perfect in this universe. And by that, I mean nothing is exactly, well, exact. And on today's episode of Life's Potluck Buffet, I'm going to talk about something that is exact for our rough purposes in life, but isn't really exact in the grand scheme of things. So just keep it tuned to this YouTube channel for today's episode of Life's Potluck Buffet. I'm John Paulus. Thanks for joining me. I'm talking about calendars. Whether you use an app on your phone or you rely on the good old-fashioned desktop calendar from your local insurance agent, odds are you probably look at your calendar many times in a day. I know I do. And I look at it in so many different forms. And I look at it all the time, and I'm constantly looking at it because I want to see what's next on my calendar. Otherwise, I don't know what's happening. So that, and though we are all very much relying on our calendars, there's one small thing that your calendar doesn't tell you, and that it's not quite accurate. Well, I mean, it's accurate for, listen, that meeting you have in 2 hours, your calendar's fine for that. Everyone's you'll be okay. Unless someone you're meeting with is using a different calendar and that calendar has gotten out of sync with yours, because there's a good chance that it will, because there's no two calendar systems are actually truly in sync with each other. And for that matter, with the actual length of a tropical year, of the time it takes the Earth to orbit around the sun. And that's because every calendar has a different way of dealing with the inexactitude of the length of that actual tropical year. That solar year has a mean average of 365 point, or a decimal, if you're using international terms, 2419 days. And it's that 0.2419 days that has been bedeviling calendar makers for time immemorial. Exactly how long? Forever. And here's the thing, that 0.249 is just a mean average. An average, not it's mean, but it's not that kind of mean. And to add another wrinkle in time, I don't remember what that book was about, there is a further problem, and that is that the moon causes the Earth to rotate at different speeds because of the way that it interferes with the tides of the Earth, which is actually slowing down time, even as we and our perception of time is speeding up. I just read a really interesting article about that, and it has to do with how much time we spend with screens. But you see, the actual length of a solar year is in itself not exact. And so understanding that, you'll understand that there's no rigid calendar or even very flexible calendar that can be exact. It's just a matter of how inexact are our calendars. And in any given person's lifetime, it doesn't make a big difference because these inexactitudes are over a grand scale of time at this point because of the calendars that we currently use and that are currently out there. But let's get down to business. My calendar says it's time to list some calendars from the least accurate to the most accurate. And I'm going to start with number 4, the Gregorian calendar. Yes, that's right. The calendar that you have sitting in front of you on that desk from your insurance agent Do they even give calendars out anymore? I don't think so. Anyway, they used to. That calendar is the least accurate of the 4 calendars I'm going to talk about today. And that calendar which started in 1582 CE, as we call it in that system that applies to the Gregorian calendar, is off by 1 day in 3,236 years. That means that calendar is off by 27 seconds per year. That's a pretty big number in the universe. And why is that? Well, it's the way that the leap years, and this year, 2024, is a leap year. That means we'll have a February 29th in the Gregorian calendar this year. Instead of 28 days in February, there'll be 1 extra day. And that means that next year, everything will seem to have leapt to another day of the week. So if something was on a Monday last year, it'll be on a Wednesday this year. I mean, after the leap has taken place, because that's when the leap begins. What's the problem there? Well, the problem is mechanics. There's no way to adjust a calendar mechanically, and that, by which I mean through a mathematical formula, that will result in accuracy. There are ways of trying to imitate the accuracy of non-mathematical adjustment of calendars, of non-mechanical adjustments of calendars, but really the most accurate way is always going to be non-mechanical, which is very interesting because we always think, oh, well, math, numbers, that sounds accurate. But formulas cannot cause calendars to be accurate because of the very inflexibility of math. That's math's greatest thing, is that it is rigid, and its worst thing is that it is rigid. Its inflexibility does not allow it to account for the fuzziness of the solar year. Number 3 is the Mayan calendar. And this Mayan calendar was formulated about 4,000 years ago. And the Mayan calendar is off by 13 seconds per year. So that is 1 day in 6,500 years. So already twice as accurate as the Gregorian calendar. If you remember 2012 and this whole kind of story that was going around that, the world is going to end in 2012 on December 21st or whatever because we're at the end of the Mayan calendar, please understand that was only the end of one long cycle of the Mayan calendar, and that we're still on the Mayan calendar. Everything's cool. So please do not worry about that. You probably weren't that worried about it because it was 12 years ago. The Mayan calendar, again, has 3 different calendars in one that work together to determine days, and it's very complex and very mathematically complex. But see, that's the problem. Too mathematically complex, because that complexity is never, if it's a mechanical calendar, it's not going to allow for the kind of accuracy that is needed when you're dealing with something that doesn't work mechanically, like the universe. So that's the Mayan calendar. That's number 3 on our list of calendars. Let's go to number 2, the revised Julian calendar. Now, the old Julian calendar, which for liturgical purposes in Orthodox churches in many places, in Christian Orthodox churches in many places around the globe, is still used. The old Julian calendar was about a day in 128 years. So that's kind of almost noticeable. in a lifetime, and certainly over the centuries it was noticeable, which is what led Gregory the 13th to institute the changes to the calendar in 1582 CE that instituted a more accurate calendar. But the revised Julian calendar, oh, and by the way, the Julian part of the Julian calendar is none other than Gaius Julius Caesar, a Roman politician and general and lover of grammar and language, and also a person who instituted in 45 BC, according to our revised Gregorian calendars, a new solar year calendar. And that was pretty good. It included one major mechanical adjustment, which was regular insertion of leap days. And that was important. But again, no mechanical calendar is going to be able to accurately reflect the solar year over time. It's going to differ from it, and we know that. The revised Julian calendar, which was created by a guy whose name is Milutin Milankovic, and if you're the speaker of any Southern Slavic languages out there, tell me if I got that right. He was a Serbian fellow, and he was wanted to create a version of the Julian calendar that would be more accurate than not only the old Julian calendar, but more accurate than the Gregorian calendar. And he succeeded. And the way that he did this is he fiddled with how leap years are calculated. And the way leap years are calculated is a little bit more intensive in the revised Julian calendar and therefore more accurate on purpose. So basically a better formula for leap years equals more accuracy. But again, as a mechanical adjustment, that can't help us. And so the revised Julian calendar, which was put out there in 1923, is off 2 seconds a year. So that's 1 day in 31,250 years. So that's pretty good. But no commonly used calendar out there can come close to the accuracy of what is called the Persian calendar or the solar Hijri calendar. And that calendar, which was developed, again, about 4,000 years ago, but it's still in use in places like Iran, has an error of less than 1 second per year. That means that it is off by 1 day in the course of 110,000 years, which makes it over 3 times more accurate than the revised Julian calendar and over 30 times more accurate than the Gregorian calendar. And what is the trick of that Persian calendar, of that solar Hijri calendar? The trick is simple. It does not rely on mechanical means to adjust the leap years. So when a day needs to be added, it is added based on an observation of the vernal equinox, the time in what we call the spring, when the sun is halfway between where it started in the winter solstice and where it ends up in the summer solstice. And by non-mechanically adjusting leap days, the Persian calendar, the solar Hijri calendar, is less than 1 second per year off. And that's because it relies on observations of humans, of equinoxes. And that observation is what makes it accurate. Much, much more accurate, as you saw, than any mechanical adjustment. In fact, people have tried to create formulas to replicate that calendar, but that kind of defeats the point, doesn't it? Because those formulas are only repeating the error of the Julian calendar, Mayan calendar, Gregorian calendar, and all other calendars that use mechanical adjustments for leap years. So, in honor of the solar year and of our most accurate calendar, the solar Hijri calendar, let's shuffle the deck of Life's Potluck Buffet cards and come up with a card for today. I hope it's about time. I hope it's not Passions Are for Hobbies. It's card 51. Being a different you teaches you a lot about the regular you. Imagine that you have one new identity completely different from one of the ones you have. It could be something you wish you knew something about. Maybe it's something you've always imagined yourself doing, but you've never done. Explain what that means about you and what you need to do in your usual life. So think about that today, on this day, and I'll see you tomorrow on Life's Potluck Buffet. Your calendar is going to work for tomorrow, no matter what type of calendar it is, so don't worry.